Hello, Nigel here with you, Nigel's Modelling Bench, and this is kind of a video that's going to go in my beginner series, hence the grey mat. You can see whenever you see one of my videos and the picture on it on YouTube is the grey mat with the tools, then you know that it's a part of the beginner series and it'll be in that playlist as well. So, as you know, some of you will know, I am building the Agostini Mustang. You can see behind me, this one here. Okay. So if you're building one of those, then this video is going to be good for you. I am also building the Hachette Lancaster Dam Buster bomber here. You can see a couple of magazines there, and that is a lovely model. We've done a standard. There's a playlist of videos putting it together out of the box, and then there's another playlist where I'm doing it revisited, where I'm making changes to the build sequence, changes to colors, adding detail, stuff like that. But if you are building any of these, or indeed any part work or a pocker, because I've got a pocker Lamborghini on the way for you very soon, anything where we've got metal parts and screws and everything, this video is going to be appropriate. What I'm going to do is show you in here all about the differences between plastic screws and metal screws, and taking away the pain in some instances that I saw Moss go through when he was building his Aventador, taking away the pain of that, and using an engineering solution which has been used for years to actually cut metal threads, or cut threads in metal, should I say, or indeed in plastic. But in the case of these part works, we don't generally need to cut the threads in plastic, because the screws that are used are often self-tapping. They cut their own thread as they go in. However, I have noticed in the seat of the Mustang, in the base, they're very easily stripped. You know, I'm 60 years old and I've been doing this for years, and I'm an engineer. I've always worked with my hands, and I managed to strip them, and I didn't even feel it strip. So I sort of went up a size and just put a bigger screw in the base of the seats. So, but it's good because D'Agostini give you extra screws, as do Hachette. They give you extra screws, and you know, we're only up to part 23 on the Mustang, and I've got this great big load of screws there spare, so it's good to have the spares to up a size if you need to in the plastic parts. So without further ado, let's get down to the bench. As I say, the pocker kit is soon going to be on the bench. Before I make a start, I'm going to make a video on that, all about the instructions and how I'm going to go about part storage and everything like that. But this is going to be all about threads, screwing. It's a video about screwing. There we go. That's what I'm going to call it. See you in a minute. Alright, so on your screen now you can see, we're really zoomed in here, you can see two different types of screws. On the left, these are actually from the D'Agostini 1/6 scale Mustang I'm building. On the left you can see here this shiny screw, the silver one we'll call it. This is called a machine screw, okay? And this is called a self-tapping screw. Now, this screw here is designed to cut its thread as it goes in, and you can see this screw has a much coarser thread than this one. So this is called a machine screw. If it had a like an Allen bolt head, okay, it would be called a socket head cap screw. If it had a hexagonal head, it would be called a machine screw, okay? I still call this a machine screw. It's actually a machine screw because it's a screw. I may be using the wrong terminology, but if it had a hexagonal head, it would be called a machine screw as well. And the screw is when the thread goes all the way to the head. If, like you've seen in fact, let me find you one. Okay, you can see here, this is a socket head, or an Allen bolt, whatever people like to call them. And you can see here the thread is not going all the way up to the head. So that is what's known as a bolt. If the thread went all the way up, it would be known as a screw, okay? So I'm calling this, for my video, for my videos, my builds, I'm calling this a machine screw, and I'm calling this a tapping screw, okay? That is designed to go into plastic or softer material. This is designed to go into metal. And the manufacturers of part works, model kits, whatever, they will have you screw that screw into a hole which has been cast into a metal part. Now, I'm an engineer, I'm ex-Rolls-Royce. I would not dream of doing that. It's the same as, I've mentioned it before, it's the same as if you went and bought an M8 bolt, or if I went and bought this is actually an M6, okay? I would expect an M6 nut, this is M6. If I went and bought an M6 nut to fit on here, I would expect it to have a thread in it. If it was just a hexagonal piece with a hole in the middle and I had to grunch this in, I would be taking it back to the shop and shouting, as would you. So why on earth would you grunch that into a cast hole in a metal part? So basically what I want to do is cut threads. That's what we're going to cover in a minute. So we drill a hole, we cut the thread, we drill the correct size hole, it's called a tapping drill. We're going to cut the correct size thread, and then we can put that screw in, and we can screw it in, and when it comes to the bottom we can actually do it up. So basically that's the difference. Okay, I'm going to go back to normal camera zoom now. That's a machine screw with a thread. That's a self-tapping screw. It has a thread, but it's designed to cut as it goes in. Okay, so for the examples, I'm going to use the Lancaster Bomber as a demonstration of thread cutting, tapping, and basics of screwing. Yes. So if we look at this one, this is pack number 3, and in here you can see they're telling us to fit this Astrodome to the glazing, and they're telling us to fit this front section, and we are using screws called BP. Here they've got a typo, it's PB, it should be BP. And the way Hachette do it, it's BP, the P meaning plastic. The other screws, the metal screws, the machine screws, are M meaning metal. So basically here we take this clear part as instructed and we place that in position as instructed, just like that. Okay, and then we take a screw. This has already been assembled, so you will see this is what happens. The screw has deposits of plastic on it because as it goes in it's actually cutting the material. So what we're going to do is just screw that in, okay, and we're just going to screw it until it stops, and then just give it a little tweak. You do not want to be, especially here because this is a clear part and it will split, you'll rip the thread out of the green plastic, you'll split the clear plastic. It just needs to go in and just stop, and that's enough. And you can see here they're telling us to fit the front, and I keep knocking that piece out. Just going to put that back in. It's not part of this video. And then fit this front section onto here. Okay, and then we'll pick up our screw as instructed, and we will put the screw into there, and again we will screw it in and just screw it in until it stops, and then just give it a little tweak just to hold it. And as you can see, that's in there. Now I think this needs to be glued as well, to be honest, but that's not part of this video. So there's your plastic screws. So that's as simple as that. That's it. Straightforward, as instructed, out of the box, job done. When it comes to metal screws, what they're telling us to do here is, you can see what we've got is the front section here, and we've got this rear Bombay area here. This is metal, and these screws, you can see they're saying BM times 3. So if I look at the front of this manual, it tells me BM is 4 2.2 by 4mm PM screws. I don't know why they call them BM and then they call them PM. They seem to do that a lot. So basically we know that it's a 2.2. That means it's M 2.2. I never take their word for it, just in case there's a typo. So what I do, I get this bag of screws. You can see it's got BM written on it. Okay, BM on there. So I know it's the right screw, and I'm going to take one of these out and I'm going to measure it. Now they're telling me it's 2.2. I can put it between those jaws and I can see that it is 2.2. Okay, so I know now that it's M 2.2, and what they're asking me to do is just grunch that in by putting that on there. I don't want to do that. I want to cut the threads. Okay, so to cut the threads, luckily this model, this one here, the Hachette, it has so far, we're only up to part 14, we have only used M1.8 and M2.2, which if you go and buy yourself a cheap tap set like this, you can find these anywhere on Amazon or whatever. This is the Tool Zone one. There's lots of different ones. You always need to look at the size of the taps you're getting. You can see in here we've got M1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, 2, 2.2, 2.5. Some of them will go M1, M1.4, M2, M2.5, and none of those have been used in this model, so make sure you're getting the right ones. And this actually has dies in it as well. You don't need the dies necessarily, but the taps are a must-have, I think. So you open this up and it's got a plastic sleeve the plastic box that it all comes in, and it's all nice and securely held together, and it can be tipped upside down and not all fall apart. You can see down here, this is written myself. This is basically a list of tapping drills. So this is the thread size, and that's the size drill you use. So if you were drilling a hole, if you were cutting a hole into a bare piece of aluminium and you wanted to put an M3 thread in it, you would drill it 2.5 and then tap the thread using your thread cutting tap. Okay, this is 2.2, so it says here 1.75. Now, you won't get off the shelf, you won't get a 1.75 drill, but you will find 1.7, 1.8. I would always recommend going smaller because drills tend to drill bigger than their size anyway. And if you use a 1.8, it may be too much, especially on such a fine thread. I mean, if you look at that, you've got 1.8 to 2.2, that's only 0.3 millimeters of total interference. So that's going to be 0.15 per side, which means the actual thread depth is going to be sorry, what I'm talking about is 0.4. It's 0.4. So if you drill it 1.8, that's 0.4. So that's 0.2 per side. So that's 1/8 thou thread depth. So you haven't got much to play with. So I've got here a 1.7 millimeter drill, and then what I'm going to do, these holes are going to get, these screws are going to go in there, and what you can see is I can rock that drill around in there, but at the bottom it fits snugly. So what the manufacturers are doing is casting a tapered hole to make the screw easier to go in. As it gets to the bottom, it's going to tighten up. Now, what a lot of people suggest is dip your screw in metal. Dip your screw in oil. So you basically get your screw on your screwdriver, dip it in a drop of oil and put the screw in. I don't like doing that for the main reason is, I mean, it's just not engineering practice, basically. But also, when you've got all this matte paint around, as you know, if you put a drop of oil here, tomorrow it will spread out massive. And I think that's what will happen. That the oil will spread on the surface, and I don't want that. So I'd rather put it together dry. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut these threads. So as you can see in this box, we have some taps, some dies. We have a die wrench, and we have these pieces here that you can insert into there and turn it into a tap wrench. Now, I would thoroughly recommend for a couple of pounds, about £3 or £4, you can buy one of these on Amazon. Now, this is absolute, total and utter junk, okay, but it's good enough for this. So if you have the bigger taps and you want to use a tap wrench, this was about £3.49, I think, and it is utter garbage. It's not even machined on center. It doesn't hold the tap perpendicular to the surface. I mean, if I put this drill in there, you'll see what I mean. When I put this drill in there, you can see it's not even perpendicular, it's not straight. So, you know, I wouldn't really use that. What I prefer to do is put my taps in a pin vise. Okay, that way you can hold it straight, you know you're going right, and also if anything's wrong, it will spin in the pin vise rather than snap the tap in the hole. So we know that we need to go M2.2. So in here we have two M2.2 taps. And you can see on here we have two different types. We have first and second. We don't have a third tap. Now the third tap's threaded all the way to the end. The first, as you can see on here, the one on the right has no thread at the front. This one on the left has just a couple of threads missing at the front. The reason they do this is so if you'd actually just drill a hole in a piece of aluminium with this drill, those uncut threads are tapered and they will give you a guide into that hole. Okay, we can also see on the end of here there is a point. Now in this situation with what we're doing, that point can be fairly dangerous, especially if you think about it. If you're doing, say, a car door and you're drilling through, you know, the inside to fit a window winder handle or something, if you're tapping a thread and the metal is quite thin at the bottom of the hole, that point will actually make an indentation and may push on the outside of the door. So what I'm going to do with these is grind that off. The only reason it's there is they use an external center when they machine them, when they make them. You can grind that point off. You don't need it. It doesn't need to be there. You don't need to take the whole, you know, to make it a flat, but just grind the point off. So I'm going to grab a little grinding stone and my little tool, and I'm going to grind that point off. Okay, so I've got my little Galax Pro tool here, bought on Amazon. It's rechargeable off the USB on the computer. We've got a little grinding wheel. That's just a cheap, nasty from a set you get with these sort of things. So all I'm going to do is, by the way, I'm using the second tap. You can see here the one with the least threads ground away, because we've already got a lead in. As I've already shown you, there's a taper in there. So I put the grinder on its maximum speed, and I'm just going to grind. And then at the end I'm just going to turn the tap so it puts like a ball end on it. And as you can see there, we've now got that flat end on it. One, it allows the tap to go a bit deeper, and two, it reduces that risk of pushing through. So I'm going to put the tap in my little pin vise, okay, do it up good and tight. Now, you can cut this dry because it's only die cast material. You can cut it dry. It makes a lot less mess. The one thing you could do on here is put a little drop of grease, a little spot of grease on there. That'll catch the threads. But it's better to do it dry, in my belief, because that way you don't get any oil in the hole. You won't get that spread. You won't get any swarf stuck in the hole. And you'll just, because it's dry, it'll just fall out. Now, you'll see some people, they will just go in and just go, just drill it in. That's okay, as long as you don't get a clog up, because remember what you're doing, you're cutting. If you imagine each one of these teeth is like a scriber, and you know what happens when you scribe on plastic? You get a slither of plastic coming off. You get the same in here, you'll get little lanes of swarf. So what you do is you go in a turn, back a bit, in a turn, back a bit. And what that's doing is it's cutting off the swarf, and then it comes back, it breaks off. So you end up with tiny little pieces rather than just one big piece. So I'll show you here what we're going to do. So I'm going to go into this hole. Okay, I get it roughly square, and I'm just going to go a turn, back a touch, a turn, back a touch, turn, back a touch, turn, back a touch, and you can see the bits of swarf coming out. Okay, and then when you get to the bottom, as you can see now, it's bottomed out, and the pin vise is spinning on the tap. And now we can just wind it back out, and you can see the swarf coming out. And that is the beauty of having it dry. You can see we've got all the swarf all over the bench. So if you are doing your Poca Lamborghini, be very careful of not putting the body down on that, because it'll scratch the paint. It'll be a nightmare. That's another reason for keeping it dry. So once again, we have the tap nice and square. It will find its own square anyway. Go in a turn back a bit, in a turn back a bit, in a turn back a bit. Okay, and then the tap stops at the end, and then wind it out. Just give it a clean out. You can see once again we've got all the swarf. You can see all the bits of swarf there on the end of my finger. That's the stuff of dreams. So once again here we can come in. Okay, and there we are. If you want to follow this build, by the way, I'm doing two builds of this Hatchet Lancaster. I'm doing one where I put it together out of the box, and then I take it all apart again, repaint it, modify whatever, and then go from there. So here we can pick up our swarf. Jess will probably bark now. We have our little vacuum. We can pick up our bits of swarf into our vacuum just like that. That's a little T-Hoo desk vacuum. Then make sure the bench is nice and clear, especially for car body work and stuff. I would have a separate cloth to put the body on so you don't get any swarf damage. So now you can see we've got those cut threads. Okay. So we can take our screwdriver, put our screw on. So this is our M2.2 screw. And as you can see, I can put that screw in there with fingertip ease. Okay, now at the bottom, it's obviously there's a couple of uncut threads at the bottom, but you can see that's on there. Okay, and that's easy to screw in. It's much better than just launching the screws in. Now, I've seen a lot of people do Partworks online. I've got to be honest, they don't bother tapping the threads, and the screws do appear to go in fairly easily. But if you watch Moss's build of the Poker Lamborghini, he really does struggle and ends up with blisters on his hands where the screws are so tight. So what we're going to do with this, we're going to come along, put that on there. Okay, so that's going to go on there. We'll hold it together, we'll start in the middle, put a screw in. Okay, and just nip that up. Do the same on the next one. You can see how easy that screw goes in. I'll do the same on this one, get the screw on the end of the screwdriver. Just like so. And we can pull it all together nice and square and just snip the screws up. So you've got the advantage of having a cut thread rather than a graunched in thread. It'll come apart a lot easier should you want to take your model apart. But I find the biggest advantage is you're not using oil is one advantage, but the biggest advantage of all, especially when you're screwing plastic parts to metal. As I said when I did this, if I over tighten this screw, that plastic's going to split. Okay? When you're screwing these in and you're graunching them in, and you can't feel when you're at the end. You can't physically feel it. So you could over tighten it, or you might leave it loose. Whereas with this, because it's a cut thread, you can feel when it's tight enough. So that's that. You can see here what I'm doing with the Lancaster. I'm changing the interior colour because they've got this darker green, and this is my version of interior green. And but there we are. So that's sort of a beginner's intro into thread cutting. And as I say, it's, you know, for what it costs for this and for the extra time it takes, it is so worth doing rather than sitting there and crunching screws in. The other problem is when you're doing that, if you've got something bigger, you always risk snapping the head off the screw. Now, if the screw's halfway in the hole and the head snaps off, what are you going to do? You can't get it out because it's down in the hole. You have to try drilling it out. But because the screw is harder than the material around it, it's going to be very difficult to do. So you have been warned. So basically, that's that. That's an intro into thread cutting, using taps, dies and everything. As I say, you can use a tap wrench, but the reason I use the pin vise is, one, it enables you a lot easier to square it all up and everything because it's just like using a screwdriver, and two, when it gets to the bottom it will spin, whereas with this, if you go too hard you'll snap the tap off, because these cheaper taps are very brittle and they're very easy to snap off. So there we go. What I'm going to do when it comes to doing the Poker intro video, what I'll do is get a part of the suspension or something, and I'll do some thread cutting on that. So I'm going to do this all over again for the Poker people, because we've got different size taps and everything, different methods, and it's also different ways of doing the screws. They're not BM and that, they're all just letters. So I'm going to redo this again for the Poker people. So if there's something you missed here, ask any questions down below in the comments, and I will cover them in the Poker video. All right, thank you for watching. Bye for now. There you go. I hope you found that useful. For those who are following the Lancaster, don't worry, I haven't jumped ahead and missed loads of parts out. I was just using those parts as a demonstration for demonstration purposes, so don't worry, I haven't changed anything there. But hopefully you got something from that. As I said in the video, you know, you can do the process of just, you know, putting a drop of oil on the screw and screwing it in, and it seems to work fine. You know, Scott over at Building with the Boys, he does that. If you've ever seen his channel, go and have a look. Building with the Boys, he's doing the Tumbler, the Titanic, the Doll's House. He's doing loads and loads, and he does loads of Roku stuff and live builds and everything. He's a great guy, and he's very local. We're going to go and have a pint together soon. But anyway, yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Just one final note. Have a look at the model you're building, because sometimes, I think Tamiya do it, sometimes the manufacturer, very cleverly, when they're casting metal parts and you need to screw into them, what they do is they'll give you like a self-tapping screw, but you'll notice that the hole that you're putting the screw in is not round, it's triangular. It's almost like a circle with 3 flats in it. And what that's doing, it's reducing the area where the screw's going in, and it's also giving somewhere for the swarf to go. Because remember, when you're cutting a self-tapping thread, you are cutting material, you're spreading it, you're cutting it, it's got to go somewhere. And that's the problem, like I said, with when you're tapping. If you just wind the tap straight in, you're making all these big lines of swarf, and they've got to go somewhere, and they can jam. In fact, you saw me in part 13 or 12 of the Hachette Lancaster build, the out-of-the-box build. You'll see I did it in there. I've actually managed to jam the tap in, and that's because the swarf is jammed in there. And to prevent that, you go a turn, go back a bit, go a turn, go back a bit. It's almost like taking out the backlash on something. So there we go. I will see you all soon. Look out for the Poker build, the intro to that. You'll enjoy that, and that's going to cover all this thread cutting stuff as well.